Hi, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Terry Martin, and I'm joined by Jeff Berkowitz of Public Affairs. We're going to be looking at a variety of the major issues that have been going on over the past week, including we're going to be taking a look at the run for governor that'll be coming up in a few years, and who might be some of the Republican candidates that would be challenging Governor Pritzker. We're going to be taking a look at what's going on with the race for the House Speaker, and will Speaker Madigan be returned to office? A lot of Democrats say no. We'll be looking at what the governor is saying about the impact of the COVID-19 on the state's budget. It's not pretty. And we'll be looking at what is happening with the COVID vaccines that are coming in from the federal government, what impact that might be having. Jeff, as we look at these issues, we'll start off with the race for governor. What are your thoughts, and what do you know about who might be some of those leading candidates for the race for the Republican nomination for governor?
Well, Terry, I've got on my list 6 possible candidates that people talk about, if their names are thrown around, as to running in the Republican primary, which of course will be in March of 2022. But if you're going to run for governor, you're going to start thinking about it now or next week, certainly in early 2021. And tops on our list is Gary Ratman. Gary is 54 years old. You and I know him because we taped a show with him about a year ago. He's a businessman. He's a self-made guy. He employs several hundred employees. Gary is the kind of guy who would say they don't work for him, he works with them. And, these are small, medium businesses. He describes himself not as a CEO, but as a ditch digger CEO, to give you an idea. He's a plain-spoken guy, and yet he knows the issues. And yet he's been active in Republican politics. So we'll come back with a little bit more, but let's give people a sense of who Gary is. Let's show them that clip that we have, Terry, from last year. This is an interview we did, I believe, in November of 2019 with Gary Ratman, ditch digger CEO of the Raybon Group.
And to set it up, you had asked him about some of the business conditions and relative to what the governor is doing. We'll take a listen to your interview.
You love Illinois, right?
Love Illinois.
But you might leave. I mean, Pritzker said you guys would never leave. Didn't he say that? He said you guys would never leave.
Pritzker said to me, he said, Gary, he goes, you built all your businesses here, your family's all here. You're never going to go anywhere. I mean, that's exactly how he said it. I'll never forget how he said it, right? And God bless him if he really believes that's the case. But that can't be the case. I can't risk the lives and business, the jobs we're talking about. I can't risk all these jobs, and just because I want to be here, right?
If you could persuade the Illinois state government to change and start going in the other direction, lower property taxes, lower income taxes, not a progressive income tax, lower workman's comp, you think would that be nirvana for you?
Well, that's Gary Ratman. I mean, what's on his mind? When I spoke with him earlier this week, he's talking the same things. What's his platform? What does he say there? It's jobs, okay? Jobs, jobs, jobs. He's going to be a job creator if he's governor. And he's going to be, look, Gary's ready to go. He tells me he's 80% likely to be running for governor. He'll decide in the next week or two. I'm betting it's going to be 100%. And we hope to have Gary on soon thereafter. He's not shy. Okay. The one thing he reminds me of is I had a conversation with Barack Obama in 2003 when he was starting to run for the U.S. Senate in the Illinois Democratic primary. And I said, look, what differentiates you from your competitors? He said, Jeff, I know the issues, I have a vision, and I speak out. What do we know about Gary Ratman? He knows the issues, he has a vision, and he speaks out. Okay. He talks about tax reform, he talks about cutting taxes, cutting property taxes, which are the highest in the country. How does he do that? That's a local issue. We'll find out more from Gary about that. He doesn't want to do what he says we're doing now is we're driving people, we're repelling our high taxes. He wants to attract a tax base, the skills that corporations need to make those companies work, okay? And he's very current because, Terry, you know what's on people's mind? It's COVID. We have a lockdown economy. Gary's not going to say he's going to do in 2022. He's going to say, Here's what I would do right now. He'll be a shadow governor, I believe, if he runs next year. And so what do? He's going to open up this economy. He's going to send people back to work. He says he can do that safely, especially those who are at age 20 to 50. He's going to send kids to school. He says back to school for in-person learning, saying he can do that safely. He's going to put the state of Illinois on a big diet, okay? The governor's talking about cutting $700 million. That ain't going to do it. We'll get to the deficit shortly. But have a big diet. But the main thing is you're going to have to be bringing in more revenue. And the way you do that is not by raising, this is Gary Ratman, it's by attracting businesses, by helping them be profitable, by giving them the right environment. They come to Illinois, they pay taxes, it all turns around. That's it in a nutshell.
Jeff, before we go on to some of the other candidates that might be running for governor on the Republican side, give us a bit of background on Gary Ratman. What kind of a guy is he? How did he make his money?
Well, Gary Ratman, 54, is a plain-spoken guy, okay? He made his money with, the Raybon Group is small and large businesses, several hundred employees. He works with people. They don't work for him, okay? He's somebody who's saying, look, if I run for governor, I can talk to Democrats, I can talk to working folks, I can talk to minorities, okay? He's done all of that as a part of his business, okay? He's a ditch digger CEO. He didn't go to college and he doesn't hide it, okay? He's not saying there's something wrong with going to college. He just didn't think he needed it. He wanted to get going. He started his business by paving driveways and digging ditches. And then he ends up paving parking lots for, I think, Kohl's and Walmart and big companies and doing other things. He started many different businesses that are successful. And that he's been a family guy. He's raised a family in Woodstock, Illinois. That's family country, okay? His company is headquartered out of Schaumburg, Illinois. He's an Illinois guy.
Let's handicap that at this point. He doesn't have much of a name. We're mentioning probably a lot of the people watching this have never heard of Gary Ratman before, but he would be someone, an outsider who never held office before, like Governor Pritzker, like Donald Trump, a businessman who comes in and looks to improve what's been going on in the state of Illinois. Who are some of the other names that we might want to pay attention to, could be running on the Republican side?
Well, a number who've been mentioned. Richard Porter prominently mentioned. He's 61. He's a partner at Kirkland & Ellis, a major law firm here in Chicago. It's an international law firm. He's been on the Republican National Committee. He's active in politics. And people say he's likely to get in. I hear he may not get in if Gary Ratman jumps in. As I said, Gary said he's 80% likely. Todd Ricketts is another name we hear a lot of. Todd is 51. He's a partial owner of the Chicago Cubs with the rest of his family, his siblings, and his parents. Todd has been active in politics. He supported Scott Walker when he was in the Republican primary in 2016 for president. When Walker dropped out, he became somewhat anti-Trump, and then eventually he became a Trump supporter. And so that's Todd Ricketts. I haven't been able to get answers from, I tried, but I haven't gotten a response back from Porter, from Ricketts, so we don't know what they're going to do.
And of course the other thing,
Darren Bailey.
Darren Bailey, Darren Bailey is Southern Illinois.
Darren Bailey is somebody, yeah, we've all heard of him because he's a state rep. He's been going after the governor and suing him.
He was elected to the Illinois Senate. Darren Bailey represents, he's certainly a strong voice
State
in
House.
Southern Illinois.
Right.
I'm not sure how he can play, remains to be seen how he plays in the Chicagoland area where, of course, there's a concentration of votes. But at least that's an early view. I don't want to spend too much time on this. I want to make sure we move along. One of the things whoever becomes governor they're going to have to face is picking up. Illinois was devastated financially before COVID. Now COVID has kicked us when we're down, and the governor has been saying about just how decimating this has been. He announced earlier this week in one of his COVID updates that we're going to have a budget deficit of $3.9 billion. And he said the governor would cut about $700 million just out of executive branch.
Well, that's not going to do anything. One of the topics, we can go to it now, or you can go to Speaker Madigan, but one of the topics we were going to discuss today, Terry, of course, is the Illinois budget deficit. And so when you look at that deficit, it's at least $6 billion. Some might put it at 10 to 12 billion, and that 10 to 12 might be more accurate. So it's kind of silly. He started out by saying, look, I've done what I can do. I don't need the legislature for this, and I'm cutting $700 million out. Well, $700 million is a drop in the bucket. And he's done nothing about, look, the major drivers on education. Well, there he is. We're showing people the relevant numbers for talking about the Illinois budget deficit for fiscal year 2021. And as you can see there, okay, we got roughly, in terms of revenue, counting Fed and state, it's about $37 billion, okay? When you add up those numbers, the fine print, if you want to put it that way, the tax revenue coming in, individual, corporate, and so forth. $37 billion is the operative number for revenue coming in, resources. Maybe we can show them, there it is, the expenditures. And the expenditures are not $39 billion, as some people say, the operating budget. Oh no, the expenditures, like if you've got a credit card and you got money you got to pay on that, you got to count that in your budget. So the total expenditures are $43 billion, rounding up from 42.9, $43 billion. So those are the numbers you want to remember. 37, 43. What's 37 from 43? Last time I did math, that's 6. There's the budget deficit right on the bottom. So with a $6 billion budget deficit, Governor, it's nice to say you can do 700. You got it. And he says, oh, if only we had gotten our fair tax through, well, then we'd have more revenue. Well, you still wouldn't have had enough because you weren't getting $5 billion more than the $700 million that you're cutting. And you're not addressing the major issue of pensions. You can't put that aside because currently, if you look at that, the pensions are taking up about 25% of your current spending, putting aside borrowing, things of that type. So that's a big driver, 25%.
Look, this is also going to be to combine it with what we were just talking about. Whoever runs for governor, the Democrats were saying that Trump did a bad job in managing the economy and how much pain there was, how many people were laid off. They weren't giving him any slack for the fact that it was the COVID that had decimated what had been a very good national economy. And therefore, it ought to be fair for the Republicans to take Pritzker on and say, look at what he's done. And here he tried to raise taxes with his so-called fair tax constitutional amendment that failed. The governor would say, this is the Republicans' fault because if we had passed this constitutional amendment, we would have the revenue we needed. But I think that's still not going to fly. And whoever runs for the Republicans for governor is going to be able to say, we're not making any of the reforms as far as controlling state spending, rolling back, as you kind of touched on, the pensions. If you're going to have a constitutional amendment, what about having a constitutional amendment to do something to stymie that growth of pensions, the automatic 3% annual increase? I mean, we're digging ourselves into a hole. And as the governor talks about systemic deficit problem in the state budget, I think he's right. But the problem isn't that we're not taxing enough. It's that we have the pension monster gobbling up every year more and more and more of state revenues. Everyone knows this. I wrote my master's thesis 27 years ago on the coming collapse of publicly funded pensions. The fact that we're not addressing that is I think to the detriment of the long-term fiscal health of this state.
And if Gary Ratman were here and we could ask him the question, well, Gary, what would you do about it? He'd say you have to restructure that liability. That means you've got to amend the Constitution to allow the legislature to cut pension benefits. So you want to amend the Constitution. You want to go to the feds and get the power to file for bankruptcy. So you can make that a part of your restructuring. But you can't stop there, Terry, because pensions are 25% of the budget. That's big. But what are the other three drivers? Education is about 28%. Human services are about 17 or 18%. Medicaid is another 20%. It's education, it's human services, it's Medicaid, and it's pensions. And you got to say to the governor, what are you doing about those categories? And you got to say to whoever's running for governor on the Republican side, what would you do? That's the discussion we should be having. And instead, as you know, Terry, when we tune into other shows, it's all about the horse race. There's no meat. There's no substance. You just put up the meat, Terry. There it is, okay? That's a budget deficit of $6 billion. And what Raybon would tell you, that $6 billion is a low estimate because it's more like $10 billion. Because you know what? You got another $4 billion there in pensions that should be being paid now, but we're not doing it. If they were actuarially sound, you would be paying not that pension number that we've got there, which is $9 billion. It's more like $13 billion. So the deficit jumps to $10 billion.
Yeah, let me
well, you got
explain
$2
that. Let me
billion.
explain that. So what
Yeah.
they're saying, people
Yeah.
have said who have looked at the numbers, we are not catching up in paying the amount of money we need to pay in so that the pensions are sustainable. What we're paying now is not is going to result in the pensions running out of money down the road. And so when we are using this number that you were just alluding to, I just want to explain. It's easy for people to get confused about what you're saying, I think. So when we have a $6 billion budget deficit, this is using the amount of money that the state is currently paying into the pensions, and your argument is, and others' argument is that to make that system sustainable, you should be paying about $4 billion more than we are currently paying in, and therefore the total deficit for the state of Illinois isn't $6 billion annually. The reality is it's like $10 billion.
Well, we got to segue to another topic, but let me just say in 30 seconds, even the 10 is low because you got another $1 billion to $2 billion in retiree health care benefits that often are excluded. They're not funded, and that brings you up to 12. So my point is not that you should rush to start paying more money to pensions. You're going to have to restructure that. You're going to have to cut it, and you need a governor who will take the bull by the horns and say, how do you do that? But before we get to the governor, let's go on to topic 3, Terry, which is the speaker. Who will be the speaker when we start this session in January of 2021? We currently have Speaker Mike Madigan, who's been there, 35 of the last 37 years, okay? He took a coffee break for 2 years, and then he came on back. And now, as you know, he's in trouble. Why is he in trouble, Terry? Because he is the center of a federal indictment. He's not named in the federal indictment, but he is central to the conspiracy outlined in the deferred prosecution agreement between the U.S. Attorney and ComEd, and also central in the indictment that came out about a month ago. And that conspiracy, let's just say in a nutshell, that conspiracy in large part involves money being funneled from ComEd through Jay Doherty. This is allegations.
It's a big picture.
This is allegations.
We just had an election for the state legislature. The new legislature will be sworn in January. The first thing they're going to do is vote on who they want to have as the Speaker of the House. Right now, it's questionable whether Mike Madigan will have the votes to be the Speaker again because so many of the Democrats are against him. One of the things the governor does not want to talk about much, and he has asked on occasion, is what he thinks about the Speaker, because he's trying to stay both on the good side of the Speaker and yet at the same time not be hit with the dirty laundry, so to speak, to make sure none of it splashes back on him. But he was asked, the governor was asked about the Speaker, and right as we were about to have a special committee in the House investigating Speaker Madigan, the governor was asked this back in September. Let's take a listen.
The Special Investigative Committee into Speaker Madigan begins tomorrow. You've said several times that you want to hear answers from the Speaker, but I wonder what specifically, because he's already said he never passed any legislation with improper motives, and anytime he referred someone to a job, he did so assuming they would do work and they wouldn't be on a ghost payroll of some kind. So What specifically do you need to hear from the Speaker, and should he testify before these hearings?
Well, if you read the deferred prosecution agreement, and if you've read things that have come out of the U.S. Attorney's Office, what you would say to yourself, I think anybody, and we've all had the ability, it's all public information, anybody would say to themselves is, there's so much more here that we need to get answers to, and you don't exactly know what questions to ask.
So what questions to ask, Jeff? What other questions you want to ask?
The Speaker were right here, right now on this show. What would we say to him? Look, the allegation is, Speaker Madigan, that ComEd, as a part of a conspiracy with you, was funneling millions of dollars over 8 or 9 years to your operatives, people in your ward, in your the wards that are in your the 13th ward, 23rd ward, which are in your House district, and they're the people who work for you. And that was going through Joe Doherty, is the allegation, the former president of the City Club of Chicago, and then Doherty was funneling it to those operatives. And also, Speaker, they'll also ask you about the allegation that you wanted a law firm. It's called Law Firm A. But the main thing is the indictment lays out that you, with Mike McLean, were trying to get money to this law firm, substantial money. Okay. And so what's going, and the allegation is you wanted somebody on the board, you wanted Juan Ochoa on the ComEd board, and he indeed was on the board. So, Speaker, what's your answer to the allegations that you were involved in those activities? Those are major activities going on for 8 years. The idea was you were getting that, and what were you given? The allegation is you were making it easier for ComEd to get the legislation they wanted that would make that company profitable. So what, Speaker Mike Madigan, is your answer to those allegations?
Well, what do you think? What do you
That's what-
say?
I think
when
that's
the
what-
vote comes, is the Speaker going to be reelected? What's your guess?
Well, and I think it's going to be very close. That's the smart money right now breaks it down this way. There are 19 House members. To get the big picture, there are 118 House members. So the election of the Speaker is really, people think of it just the Democratic Party because they have the majority, but actually they need 60. Right now they got 73. So they need 60 votes. The Democrats got 73 after the last election, so they have the votes without any Republicans if they can get together to make the person
And I
Speaker.
believe the Black Caucus said
we
they would
get there,
support the Speaker.
that's right. So he's got 22. He's got
Do you have the
22.
count of how many Democrats he's lost who have come out and said they won't support the Speaker?
That's 19. So he's lost 19, he's got 22, and there's nobody else. There's Stephanie Canafoot, okay, is running, but she doesn't seem to have many she can count. And the Republicans have 45, because remember, everybody gets to vote. And if the Democrats don't get together and pick their 60 and get unified, well, then the Republicans can have a role. And the last thing I'll say on this is that if you poll around, if you go around the state and you look at the people who recently had close elections in the election we just got, what you get for 5 or 6 folks is that these people are saying, I don't know. Why don't they know? Because they know that Mike Madigan has like a 76 unfavorable rating if you poll in their
76%.
district. Unfavorable in their district, okay? And they know that Governor Pritzker now is out up to like a 57% unfavorable in their district. And yet they need the money from Madigan's supporters, who are the labor unions, and they lead the Madigan power and know-how, so they're torn. Do they go with, hey, my district really wants a new speaker? Or do they go with, hey, I need that Madigan money and that labor union money, and the labor unions are behind Madigan, I need that to get reelected. So
we might
nobody
have-
knows
we
how
might
those
have
folks
one
are
of
going to
the-
go.
The first time in about 40 years, we might have a real race for who is going to be the Speaker. And and then the question
And the thing
is,
is-
that some have brought up to me, the Republicans who are in the minority in the House could make a deal with Madigan that and maybe they would vote for him. Maybe, I mean, this is speculation, but some Republicans would do a deal with Madigan to give him the votes he needs, so that they can get something that they want.
I think less likely. I don't think the Republicans are crawling into bed with Mike Madigan. They're not giving up that issue for 2022. They might crawl into bed with some of the Democrats who oppose Madigan. But the more important thing, Terry, because we got to leave this before we go, is that there was a special investigations committee, okay? And that was led by Chris Welsh, okay? And what did he do? What did State Representative Welsh do? Basically, people would say he made it into a show investigation. They called only one witness who was kind of devastating for Madigan and others, one witness from ComEd, but then he would not give the Republicans what they wanted, a subpoena to go after Mike Madigan or any other witnesses, and basically shut that committee down
They pulled
with
the
no
plug on that
charges, no
committee.
witnesses.
Yeah, they had
Shut it down,
basically
right.
one hearing. They had, I think, two. One was perfunctory, and then they had one witness. So this was, the Republicans are saying this was a sham. This was a show trial.
Right.
I mean, you know, they said, well, we're going to have a special investigative committee to look into the Speaker Madigan, and then they did nothing, absolutely nothing. So
We got to get out. Let's get out. Let's close with what are people thinking about as we close this show? They're thinking about the vaccines that are coming from the federal government into Illinois. That if you get it up to 40%, we would hope it would be higher, but as soon as if you got to get the vaccine into Illinois, you got to get it distributed. It could take 3 or 4 months to get it up to 40%. People would say that's not herd immunity, but we have maybe 800. What do we have now? 800,000 people who've been confirmed cases, but we have probably 6 times or 8 times that number, about 5 million people in Illinois who've probably been infected, with the great majority who asymptomatic. So the point is, you got 40% who have immunity built up because they've had COVID, and if you get 40% vaccinated, you've got herd immunity. You should be starting to open up the economy now, because it's a new world in 2021.
Well, we hope so. As we go into Christmas, they're still talking about shutting things down. Hopefully that won't last long. The governor announced earlier today, I mean, the feds were saying, hey, we got the vaccine. As we tape this, Moderna was just given permission. So now we have a number of vaccines, Pfizer, Moderna, and there's more on the road. But the governor announced that there was some bad news relative to getting the vaccines.
Previously, federal authorities had notified us that they planned to ship out nearly 8 million Pfizer vaccine doses to states, large cities, and territories across the country next week. However, as of this morning, I'm disappointed to learn that the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services informed us that per the direction of Operation Warp Speed's General Perna, that estimate was tightened significantly, down to 4.3 million doses shipped nationally next week.
Talk right now. Okay, so the thing of it is here, folks, we can count on significant vaccines coming in. We're not sure of the amount, but from the federal government to Illinois. We can count, I think, in the next 2 or 3 months, a real likelihood that we're going to have 40% of Illinois vaccinated, at least, okay, from these new vaccines that are being shipped here. That's not enough for herd immunity, but if you already have 40% who have had it before, you're now up to 80%. What does herd immunity mean? It means simply that when somebody has COVID and they're looking for like 10 people to infect, that vaccine, that virus is looking for 10. If 8 out of 10 actually already are immune, it just keeps bouncing back. Eventually, the disease goes away.
I think they've heard about herd immunity. Hopefully they get it. Jeff, we're going to have to close out. We wish Merry Christmas, Happy Holidays, everybody. Happy New Year. Jeff and I will hopefully be taking a look next week at some of the major stories that will be coming up in 2021, as well as some of the big stories we covered in the last year. And as always, leave your comments if you're watching us on YouTube. And Jeff, we will say goodbye.
So long.